Welcome. A very warm greetings to you all. Thank you for joining us again for another Pariyatti Presents event. My name is Briha Sarathi, and I'm here on behalf of Pariyatti as its Executive Director. We're grateful that you all joined us today. For those of you who are not already familiar with Pariyatti, we're a non-profit charitable organization based in the USA. Our mission is to enrich the world by disseminating the words of the Buddha, providing sustenance for the seeker's journey, and illuminating the meditator's path. Pariyatti imports books from around the world, reprints books, publishes new titles, and converts existing material into digital formats. We protect and provide an enormous catalog of Dhamma resources in many languages and formats that otherwise would not be as easily available. We offer many free services such as the Pariyatti Learning Center, the Treasures of Pariyatti, Dhamma Storytime, and the Daily Words for Inspiration via email, RSS feed, and our mobile app. We offer most audio and video material, as well as many eBooks and audiobooks free of charge, including a large number of resources for students of SN Goenka. We also organize donation-based residential Pali workshops and facilitate pilgrimages for Vipassana meditators. We're happy to share that after 2 years of COVID-related shutdowns, our pilgrimage program has started again, and there's currently a pilgrimage underway in India and Nepal. Our residential Pali workshop program will start again next year. For more information about Pariyatti, please visit our website at pariyatti.org. Please note that in order to ensure a seamless experience for our audience, we've chosen to pre-record this introduction as well as the subsequent conversation with Bill Crecelius. The question and answer portion of this event will be live, and Bill will be responding to questions that we receive during this event. So please feel free to send your questions via the chat feature in Zoom, and send your questions to the user named Send Questions Here. So for today's event, we're joined by Bill Crecelius, whose book we've published. The title is A Meditator's Handbook, How to Untie Knots. Bill is a Vipassana teacher in the tradition of SN Goenka. He came into contact with Vipassana in 1971 while traveling in India. He's married to Anne, who's also a Vipassana teacher, and they live in Northern California and have a son. Today, Bill is going to be interviewed by Marta Van Patten. Marta is a documentary filmmaker and also a Vipassana teacher in the tradition of SN Goenka. So, without further ado, I give you Bill and Marta.
Hi.
Hi, Bill. So thanks for being with us today. I had fun reading this book again. I read it before, and I found it to be kind of deceptively simple because it's full of practical advice in establishing one's Dhamma life and practice. But it's also full of profound truths that could take a lifetime to really realize for oneself. So I found it just beautiful because it's spelled out in such a straightforward, no nonsense kind of way that somebody, that anyone can pick up if they've established, their meditation practice by doing a course, and then help them forward on their path.
My plan.
Yeah. I also couldn't help but think about how I was growing up in the California Bay Area when you all were establishing your practice in Berkeley. I was out over in Mountain View. So it's kind of sweet to think of you're all my elders, and you helped pave the way for a lot of the centers that we have today in that area. And it was just heartwarming to think of so many of you doing the work that was going to help so many of us later on.
Oh, that's really cool. I never knew that.
Yeah. So can you tell us just a little bit about what inspired you to write this book, and how did it come about?
Well, I was always looking for interesting little tidbits and things like that, and I kept them in a little file on my computer called scratchings, and I still do it today. And I see something interesting, and I'll just copy it and stick it there. And then I wrote one of the chapters about something that inspired me at the time, and then something else, and then pretty soon it just started unfolding, and then there were many rewrites and things like that. New ideas came up, suggestions from people and stuff.
So what did you mean by scratchings, Bill? Are these quotes, images, or what was that?
It's just a file on my computer that I save either things that I've written or things that I found that are inspiring to me or just kind of catch my attention. And I just keep saving them, and they get longer and longer. And if I might write a few paragraphs or a few pages about something that I've been thinking about that maybe would help people, something like that, and then I save it there.
And can you tell us a little bit about what the newsletter was, how that connected people in the early days of our tradition?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. When I left India, one of the things I mentioned to Goenkaji in my last course was something about putting together a newsletter or something like that. And he's got this ironclad memory, and so I get a letter or some a year later or something about it, and here's this lady, Charlene Merkel, who's now Charlene Spretnak, very well-known Korean writer, and she contacted me, and she'd contacted Goenkaji and Bob Hover about something about doing a newsletter, and so I started putting all the wheels together about getting it distributed, and I found somebody to do the wheel that we used for about the first 7 or 8 years, 9 years, I don't know how many years it was. The guy that was on my course in Dahazi, and then she dropped out after the first issue. But she sent me the markup, and I took it to a printer, got it printed, and we got a bunch of people together and put the labels on. We were lucky, one of the meditators, the people that I first met when I went to California, he worked at UCSF and he had an account there. We were able to use his account to put in all of the addresses that Luke Matthews had put together, sitting in Goenkaji's office with stacks and stacks and stacks of papers from the courses Goenkaji had. And he made a list for addresses for countries, all the countries in the world. And then he sent them out. So we put all those addresses and the ones from Hover into this computer, UCSF, and it was, one of those big, huge monster things. And that's how we got the addresses and kept track to them over the years. And the first issue came out in 1974. So I had some friends in like France and England and Australia and New Zealand, things like that. So we just kept printing more and more copies. And after we sent them out in the United States, then we'd ship them off to overseas. It got big pretty quick.
When you said you found someone to do the wheel, can you tell people a little bit more about that? That means draw the image of the Dhamma wheel.
Yeah.
How did you? Yeah.
So a guy by the name of Sanji over in Marin County, he was an artist, and so we used to have group sittings over there sometimes, and there was a little Dhamma house over there, and he would come, and one day I asked him about it. He said, sure. So he did that. And then one guy moved from Texas to be here to help get it, keep it together. And some people wrote articles, and it was just everybody kicking in a little bit.
Okay, great. What do you feel you learned from writing this book?
Well, I learned that with some effort, you can really help a lot of people. You cannot believe how many times I meet people that thank me for this book. I mean, every time I'm in any kind of meditation environment, whether it's in a course that I'm conducting or sitting a course or whatever, people always come up to me and thank me. It's just so I realized that a lot of people have been inspired, even some very old students, which really surprised me. And so I think I learned that if you just do some stuff, it'll happen. It grows. We've seen it. I mean, we started just having little one days in the Bay Area, and now we have 3 centers in California. So,
yeah.
It grows.
So I was hoping you could read from a few sections of the book that really spoke to me and I think might speak to others. There's one section on page 17 where you talk about Metta Day and specifically the 2:30 group sit and what it feels like.
Okay. You may have noticed on day 10, which we call Metta Day, that once you start talking, everything changed. You were extroverted and thoughts of sitting were gone. At 2:30 p.m., however, there was a sitting. This is a very important sitting, and you should reflect on it when you return home and see how hard it can be to meditate. When you began this 2:30 sitting, you may have realized immediately that your meditation was different. Your mind was probably distracted or agitated, and it was hard to settle down. There may have been aches and pains. Your meditation had changed, and you had only been talking a short while. By the end of the hour, however, your mind had probably settled down somewhat, and you were pretty much back to where you were at 9 a.m., just after learning the practice of metta. And at 6 p.m. group sitting, you would have had this happen again. If you're not careful, you won't notice this, but it's a very important lesson. It should give you insight into what is happening in the outside world and why your daily sittings are so important. You will also see that what you are dealing with is natural and is not that you are doing something wrong.
Great. Yeah, I love this section because it is such a profound experience and we don't often talk about it. And I'm wondering, do you remember the first time you kind of realized that there was this correlation between this and daily practice? Or is there a story there, how that came to you to write about that?
I can't remember. I can't remember when I realized it, but it may have been after this 20-day we did with Bob Hover up in Applegate, California. It was a pretty profound course for me.
You mentioned Hover. Can you just tell people who he is? People may not know.
So Robert Hover, or we call him Bob, was a teacher that was appointed by Sayagyi. And Sayagyi appointed about 6 or 7 people around the world who had done courses with him. Some of them, interestingly, like Amersfoort in Holland, had only sat for 2 days with him. But he had attained quite a bit in 2 days. And Hover went twice, once for 30 and then another one even longer. And he instructed them all to sit a course with him, knowing about the dates and the time, and to keep in contact with him so he could send metta while they were practicing.
Great. Okay, so on page 16, there's another section I'm hoping we can look at. You talk about the importance of establishing a place.
Okay. If you're serious about developing a practice, you must find a place to be in the spirit of Dhamma that is separate from the mainstream everyday world. With this in mind, the first thing to do is to arrange your sitting place. As Goenkaji mentions in the final discourse of the 10-day course, it is good to have one place to meditate that is always the same. If it's a little bit quiet and away from the usual traffic of the house, it will help. A separate room would be ideal. A large closet that isn't being used works very well, even though that's a pretty rare thing, at least in my house. If something this obvious is not available, then a place in your bedroom or home office that doesn't get much use will work. A good place is one where you can put your cushion, shawl, timer, etc., and they won't be disturbed.
Great. Wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your early days of sitting in Berkeley, California, and what your initial sitting place was like.
Okay. My first place was a little studio apartment I had, and I sat in this little kind of hall transition between the bedroom and the bathroom. And it was a closet also. So it was very good. It was dark, and it was, since I was the only one living there, there was no traffic. So it was a great place to sit. And it was very high up in the Berkeley Hills, and just very, very quiet neighborhood. So it was a great place for meditation.
Great. Wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how there's often kind of a fog that can come in during daily sittings, which is very common. And I wondered if you'd read this section on page 18.
I will give an example. When I returned to the States after my years of travel, I decided to live in Berkeley, California, where I knew there were many other meditators who had also recently returned from India. I knew these friends on the path would support my practice. I rented an apartment and settled down to live a householder's life. One night, while I was meditating, it seemed like I had been sitting for at least an hour. I looked at my watch. 10 minutes had passed, nowhere near an hour. I started my practice again, and it seemed like another hour had passed. I was so agitated and so distracted. I checked my watch, and again, and only 5 more minutes had passed. This happened a few more times. Fortunately, I realized I was at a crossroads. If I let my mind play this trick on me and got up and stopped sitting after only 15 minutes, I would be doomed. That sitting went on and on and on. I thought it was never end. Lifetimes passed, but I did not give up. This never happened again to such a degree. I had overcome this mind that doesn't want to change. This is the kind of thing that you have to guard against as you start your practice at home. The mind will work against you, and it won't be the same as it was on the course. Other hurdles may turn up in your sittings as you begin to practice at home. And as you continue from day to day, sometimes you will find that when you are doing your 1 hour sittings, you are in a fog. It could be that you even fall asleep during your sittings. This could happen in the morning or night, or possibly both. There is no way to predict when it will happen, or even if it will happen. It may seem to you, as it has to others, that you are wasting your time meditating when this happens. I would like to assure you that you are not wasting your time, even though it may seem that you are trying to walk through mud or swim in molasses. It will only pass if you persevere. How do you do this? When this happens, you become aware that you have lost your awareness. Start again with as calm a mind as you can muster. Try Anapana for a while and some intentional breathing. Make your breath a little stronger so you can feel it. You will rise to the surface of this dull, aimless mind from time to time and work with the awareness of sensations, and keep knowing that they're impermanent nature. You will find that will eventually it passes.
Yes, it's really nice. I also remember trying to establish a daily practice when I first started after my first course, and just keeping the eyes closed, and that same exact experience of just, it feels like hours have passed, and, just don't look at the clock, being, it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
Today you're sitting and you have this sitting that just seems to go on and on and on.
Yes. Yes. I'm wondering, there's a little later we don't have to put up the screen, but I just want to read it because I think it's really interesting. You write, whatever you do, don't be defeated. Never think all is lost. Just apply right effort to make each sitting successful. They will all be different. And when you come to accept this and not expect something you think is meditating, you will have moved a big step in the right direction. Yeah, this is so profound to me, because we often have this image of what a meditator is supposed to be, what our life should look like, what our sittings should look like, what our mind state should look like. And in fact, in this tradition and this technique, it's just accepting whatever is happening right now and not trying to be some kind of meditator. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about that realization that to just accept your mind the way it is right now, and maybe more tips on how to do that for people.
I think the thing you really have to do is get to the point where you're being aware of the rising and falling of sensations. If I were going to write a book, this is what it would be about, because this is where you got to cut the mustard. This will make it easier to meditate. You'll get more benefit out of your meditation. You will start actually improving your practice. This is the thing that is the key. I mean, the Buddha talks about it constantly. It's in all the discourses. It's, being sampajanya, being aware of the rising and falling of these sensations that are you're experiencing in your body. When you put your entire focus on that arising and that falling of whatever's happening, or if it's bhanga, it's just falling. You want to you won't be thinking about anything else. It will keep you really occupied, and it will allow you to be aware of the sensations for a longer period of time. And sensations will fade into the background. Whatever they are, you won't even hardly notice what they are, because you'll be on this changing nature of this oscillating in your body. This is what brings nibbana. This is how you break through, by watching that constantly changing sensations. And that it gets you to the first stage of Nirvana, second, third, and fourth stage of Nirvana. That is it. It is when you're able to see the entire Namarupa changing at an amazing fast rate. And when that happens, you learn. And you learn to anicca. And when you learn anicca, you learn anatta and dukkha. And so that is the way to keep your practice strong.
Great. So there's another section that I think is really helpful on page 23 that I'm hoping you can read about intoxicants.
Okay. I have a lot of experience with that. What I discovered during the first few years, when I took a drink and then tried to meditate, that it was like a lens that had been smeared with Vaseline. The dope or the alcohol acts as a filter. In the entertainment business, they use a camera lens filter like this, which makes the model or actor that is well past their prime still attractive. This is a false impression that is created by using drugs. Another analogy is when you walk down the street and a shop window has been covered with a white coating while it's being remodeled so that you can't see it clearly. You may make out some things inside, but everything is fuzzy. This is how drugs and alcohol affects one's perception. They're a mask that doesn't allow one to see what is really happening. The other mistaken impression is that drugs gives one heightened awareness. This is totally false. Some drugs give us an altered awareness and some a modified awareness. It is nothing that will ever help a meditator because in order to experience the truth, reality must be seen as it is. Someone who's numbing themselves, drown out some past sorrow may be happy living this way. But relieving past sorrows experienced as sensation is what meditation is about. We have found a tool to deal with the vicissitudes of life. But instead of putting a very sharp edge on that tool to cut through the mess, we dull the tool until it is practically useless. As a new student, you have to make this decision yourself. I have never been very good at taking advice from those who are smarter than me until I met Goenkaji. My father had still been alive. When I started meditating, he would have probably been shocked that I was listening to someone that was wiser than I was, but he would have also been quite happy.
That's really sweet. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your early life. Tell us a bit about, your growing up and what you used to do that your father might not have deemed as very wise.
I guess, I probably would have been on Ritalin when I was in school, when I was a kid. I mean, I was one of these active kids and, teacher, Bill, settle down, whatever, Billy, And then as I got older, I got into, I started smoking young. I started drinking with my friends young. And I just was always going the wrong direction, you know what I mean? And then finally I got wise after I graduated from high school and kind of goofed off. So I decided after working that, hey, this is really dumb. I'm going to go to college. So I went to night school, got what I needed to go to college. I went to college and I kind of repeated the same thing because in college, they really know how to drink. And so then I got out of college and I got drafted. It was Vietnam War time. It was only about 3 or 4 months after college. And so I went in and I decided to go, some guy tipped me off, a friend of mine's brother-in-law, about military intelligence. And that was like a really, really great way to get in the Army in those days, be in the Army, I mean. And so I got shipped to Korea after a year at Korean language school. And on the way, there were a couple other guys who also were in my class, and we've really been friends ever since military intelligence training. And then we got the same barracks at Fort Myers and on and on. So I was reading this book, and it was about these people who were traveling around the world on just about nothing. And I said, hey, we could do this, And they said, great. And so we read the article too, and we made a pact. We were all gonna get out together around the same day, and we travel. And something happened to both of them. One got a girlfriend, and the other, his father died a couple of days before discharge. He had to come back to the United States. So I did it by myself. And then I ran into Goenkaji. And, it just changed everything. As I said in the book, some people come out, they lit up a joint, and other people, they throw their stash away, and I didn't have a stash, but I pretty much stopped drinking. I mean, I would have a beer in the summer or something like that, but that was it. And for a couple of years, then I even stopped that.
So how did you meet Goenkaji? You said you ran into Goenkaji. So how did that happen?
So I got inspired in Korea by a Korean monk that I'd met who had been in Vietnam and must have had a really hard time, pretty rough experience, came back, dropped out of the world, became a monk. And on a picnic with some friends near his monastery, this beauty spot, you've seen them in the beautiful paintings of China and Korea and Japan. He started telling me about Buddhism and about the monk and how he dropped out and all that kind of stuff. Because I'd wandered off from the group to go look around this really cool monastery up in the hills outside of Chuncheon. And so then I started reading about it, comparative religions, and I realized Buddhism is the only one that makes any sense. So then I looked around Japan, but it's very difficult there. I wasn't inspired. I mean, the temples were beautiful. I couldn't make any connections. The same in Thailand and on and on. Finally, I got down to Singapore, and I ran into these two girls. This was in 71, I guess. And they had obviously just done one of the first courses of Goenkaji for Westerners. And they told me about it. It just really clicked. I said, this is really it. I mean, this is what I need. And obviously it was a vibrational thing. And then I kept running into people, and finally I was up in Tengboche near Everest on this trek, and I ran into this guy who was studying Tibetan Buddhism. And he just every day he talks about Tibetan Buddhism, and I said, I'm not really that much interested in Buddhism, but I'm interested in meditation. He says, oh, you want to see Goenka? Okay. So this is Goenka, and I looked at the book, and there's Goenka's name with these two girls, right? So then from then on, the amazing thing that happened is I could not smoke dope. In Nepal,
before you did the course.
Yeah, even as soon as I decided I was going to go. So in Nepal, they had these government shops that sold hashish. I mean, it was just so available. It was just, people, everyday people smoked it. I mean, their lives are miserable, and they live really hard lives. And so we went up to Everest Base Camp, we went up to Kalabatar next to Everest, and we trekked back to Namche Bazaar, and there this guy was again. So we started talking, and he lights up a joint and smoked it. Man, I got wildly sick. Couldn't. So that was it. I didn't want to smoke anymore. Then we get back to Kathmandu, and there's some people there was, no, I don't want anything, So I just we're on our way down to the course. I get to Varanasi, and after lunch, this guy said, let's light up a joint. So we light up a joint, and I passed. I got violently sick. It's particularly stupid person. I tried it one more time on the train going across India to my first course, and that didn't work either. So I didn't get violently sick, but I knew right away I was really not feeling well. And so just getting that connected by making the decision to go, I couldn't smoke anymore. So that was a pretty strong impression on me.
And did you know that intoxicants were one of the precepts? You didn't know that at all at that point? Yeah. No. And can you talk about, you said obviously it was a vibrational thing for people who, can you just explain, what do you mean by that? In simple words.
Well, okay. Somehow I have this connection with this meditation, and probably from past lives, because I've done it before. And when I made that vow to go, I didn't know it was a vow, but I made a decision anyway to go to that course. I set something in motion, some internal force in me or in the universe. I was picking up on something or whatever. I don't know what it was. but it just changed the way that I was experiencing things. And I just found that when I got there, it just felt like home. And even though it was hard, I mean, it was very hard this first course. It wasn't like today. There were no cushions or beds or anything. You're all in concrete or stone, all the time. Unless whatever you had in your backpack, you could throw on the ground. Anyway, didn't bother us. I mean, it bothered us in a way, but I mean, we were all pretty happy to be there. Everybody, was.
So how did you do that? I mean, how do you sit on concrete? Like, it's so hard, the first course, even with all the cushions and mats and things that we have. But how did you do that? Do you remember how you managed?
Well, I mean, being travelers, you're used to sleeping on who knows where,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the Indian third class in those days, it was just a piece of wood, and you sat on and slept on and everything else. And sleeping in monasteries or some you could sleep in were free, when you're traveling and stuff. And so you were just sleeping on hardwood. And a lot of those countries just like that. And so we got to our room. We did have a pad, that you travel with, just to lay on. Not the kind of go out nowadays, the old fashioned, just that hard rubber,
Mm-hmm.
but it took a little bit of it out. But I think for the hall, I just folded up I had a blanket or something. That was it, like, a little something about that thick. And yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable, especially trying to maintain, adhitana.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a story about you starting to sit one-day courses. So we're back in Berkeley, California again. And I wondered if you could read this paragraph for us on page 29.
For the first 2 years after I returned from India, I sat a one-day self-course every other weekend. This gave me a lot of strength, and it will do the same for you. The best is to start at 4:30 a.m. and work until 9 p.m., which is what I did. But even if you don't do that, you will find if you just use the relaxed schedule they use at official one-day sittings, 9 to 4 or 5, it will be a big help.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about these one-day courses. Did you do those on your own, or did a group of you do them? How did you start doing them? Or was that something could you encourage you all to do when you went back home, or did it just start happening?
No, it just started happening. I just realized that I needed to get immersed in the practice if I was going to be able to continue. And I just did them on my own. Every once in a while, somebody would join me.
I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about livelihood and how to establish a livelihood that allows us to continue to establish our practice. Because I think a lot of old students struggle with this. And what do you say about, balancing a livelihood with establishing a sitting practice?
Livelihood can really pull you down. I mean, not only is it the Sheila aspect, but it's also the kind of job that people take that, you just like Silicon Valley kind of stuff. They want you to work 16 hours a day and stuff like that. I remember one time we were staying with some friends that lived down in Los Altos, I think it was, in the hills. A beautiful home. They were making tons of money. And the guy's wife comes home. After we sat, gone to bed, we never even saw her. It was like 11 o'clock at night. We get up the next morning to sit. She's already gone. She's already gone back to work. She totally lost her practice. She had no practice. She was making tons of money, but she'd lost it. I know they got back into it later, but it's just, you have to find a balance in life. You have to find a place to live that is peaceful. You have to find a job that's going to allow you to have time to meditate. It's hard sometimes. I mean, I told my boss, the last job I had, I told him, I said, I need to make X number of dollars a year. That was, of course, it was a sales job. I had to do that myself. I said, I need to have 30 days off every year for doing my meditation practice. And, and then I didn't even know I was going to be an AT. A couple of years later, I became an AT. And I took another 30 days off for that. And luckily, I was a good enough salesman, and he was a good enough guy that I was able to do that. But, the guys, a lot of people, they did work in a more balanced IT environment, but they worked on contracts, and then they took off part of the year. Or some people worked as teachers, and then they took off part of the year. So you got to find some way, if you're really serious about your practice and you really want to get established, to include it in your life.
So there's another section where it's about stimuli and just all the input that we have in daily life in the world. Page 29 starts with when they leave the monastery. I'm wondering if you could read that section for us.
When they leave the monastery, monks go around with their heads down and do not avert their eyes in order to avoid all the stimuli. You will be able to eliminate some of it by what you choose to read and watch on television and what movies you see. But even then, it permeates the air. It also fills the websites we visit, our email, and now even our telephones. So these one-day sittings will be so important in refocusing your mind on the nature of impermanence. When you sit in the cushion, it is as if you pour yourself through a strainer. You go through, but all the junk stays in the strainer. You arise from your cushion refreshed.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Such a wonderful image as well. It's on the back of the book. I wondered if you could just talk a bit more about that, just the nature of doing a one-day course and how it helps with managing all the stimulus, the billboards, the messages, the emails, the interaction with someone at work that was a little unsettling. Could you talk more about how sitting a bit longer from time to time helps manage that stuff?
It just makes your anicca stronger. And so you're more, it arises to the surface easier when you start seeing your mind follow something it maybe shouldn't. And you start feeling it. So that's why you got to keep sitting at least once in the morning or once at night. And also, like, you may get off on a track, maybe you might, if you're at work and there might something happen, you might get a little bit upset or something, but usually you bring it back pretty quick because you start feeling uncomfortable and whatever. So I think that's the way it helps. You just have to try to control your life, because around outside it's a mess.
Yeah, so I wanted to move on to this beautiful section of the book about Kalyanamitta, or right friendship on the path. On page 34, I'm wondering if you can read this. It's a beautiful stanza spoken by the Buddha in the Mangala Sutta at the end of this section.
On one occasion, the Buddha was living among the Sakyans in a town named Sakkara. Ananda, on returning from his morning alms round in the town, approached the Buddha. He greeted him and sat to one side. He addressed the Buddha and said that during his alms round, he had been thinking, and that it came to him, the importance of friends. While living the holy life, he said, Bhante, half of the holy life is having virtuous people as friends, companions, and colleagues. The Buddha replied, don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. Having virtuous people as friends, companions, and colleagues is actually the whole of the holy life. When a bhikkhu has virtuous people as friends, companions, and colleagues, it can be expected that he will pursue the Noble Eightfold Path and that he will develop in it. I have found this advice of the Buddha to be influential in my life. These Kalyanamitta friends in Dhamma have helped me on the path. They have guided me on the path, and they have not tried to misguide me. Foolish people have brought down more meditators than any other power on earth. The words, don't associate with fools, are probably the most important words the Buddha ever spoke to a householder who is new to the path of Dhamma. This may apply to the not so new students as well. These words are the very first line of the Mangala Sutta, a sutta wherein the enlightened one explained the highest welfares that a meditator has. The Buddha thought it was so important that he started the sutta discourse with this warning. Asevana cha balanam, pandichanan cha sevana, puja cha puja, nyanam ektam mangalam. Avoidance of fools, the company of the wise, honor where honor is due. This is the highest welfare. Wow, that is it. That is the thing that you really have to include in your life. Those Dhamma friends, I'll tell you, they really make a difference. I was so fortunate when I got to Berkeley and I ran into all these people. I mean, for years, all the years we lived in Berkeley, 7 or 8 years, it was like that. And when I moved up here to Mendocino, it was the same thing. There were all these meditators here.
Yeah, earlier in this discussion, you mentioned when you first got to Berkeley and you tried to call someone. Can you tell that little story again? Because I think we missed it.
Okay. So driving up the coast from Southern California, and I had these friends, Doug and Ty, and they lived in San Francisco. I didn't know, but they were just leaving the place they were living that day. And I drive into San Francisco and I see a phone booth. So I pull over, I go to the phone booth and I dial the number I had for them. And they answer. And I said, hey, how you doing? It's Bill, I'm here in San Francisco. And they said, oh, where are you at? And I said, I said, it's something called Goff or Cough or something like that in some other street, And they said, what? They said, look up at the window across the street. I look up and there they are in the window across the street. It was so amazing. And they said, oh, well, there's going to be a group sitting tonight at this other couple who lived 1 block over. So we walked around the block over there. We sit there. There's like about 10 meditators there. And that was it. I mean, I was enmeshed in a culture of meditators. And it was like that for the next 7 years while I lived there. It was just amazing.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Okay, so on page 43, there's this section about anicca, and I wanted to ask you a bit about it, starting with part of the problem.
Part of the problem is that the awareness of anicca is difficult to implement in your practice. Another part of the problem is that one doesn't hear what Goenka is saying or doesn't feel it's important. Students are consumed by just trying to feel sensations. You have felt sensations and you are aware it is not important what type of sensation you feel. Any sensation is good, gross or subtle. It doesn't matter. Now remember that this sensation is changing. It is anicca. That's all there is to it. Feel the sensation while also being equanimously aware of it arising and passing. It is simple. It is not easy to do though. At first, you may keep forgetting that your goal is not only to be aware, sati, of the sensations, vedana, but also to let part of your mind be aware that these sensations are changing. This awareness will slip away. But as soon as you realize that you have forgotten, then start knowing anicca again. Of course, it will again slip away. This is a training of the mind. So when you realize it again, start to be aware of the fact that the sensation you are feeling is impermanent. Just think about this. When your teacher kept mentioning something over and over again in class, didn't you get it that this was going to be on the exam? When your teacher in college said, you might see this again, wasn't that a signal that it was going to be on the test? Well, the test you are taking is called life. And the answer to Vipassana quiz is just keep knowing anicca. If you know that answer, you can't fail the test. Not only that, but your life will be successful. Within the sensations, there is this arising and falling. It may be happening slowly, arising, falling, or it may be happening very, very quickly. Just observe that. Be aware of that. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold. It's your painful, vibrating or dull. Just be aware of that arising and falling anicca. That should be your goal. This is all you have to do. Feel that sensation and know its impermanent nature. Continually feel it without interruption and don't react.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm wondering if you could tell us more about your own kind of meditation journey and how you came to give more importance to knowing anicca rather than just merely feeling the sensations, which is kind of how we start out, it seems like.
It's really hard to get that. I don't know why it is. I mean, at first I'm saying anicca, you know, not how you do it, you know. So you need to get to a point, I guess, in your practice that, yeah, I see students on courses. So many of them, they can't even feel sensations, maybe especially in their back or their chests. So it's quite a challenge just to get your concentration up enough to be able to feel sensations.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hearing him say anicca, but you know, he really doesn't start getting into it really strongly until the long courses. Talks about it in each section of the Satipatthana Sutta. So eventually it starts penetrating your mind, and hopefully people will keep telling you that oscillation that's taking place in that sensation is really what we're after. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Or it is easy, but it's hard too. You know?
Simple, yeah, but difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There's another section on the paramis. It's on page 53. I'm hoping you can read this section for us.
Okay. Tolerance, Kanti, is a quality that when found in others is highly appreciated. These are people who don't criticize, condemn, or complain. People who have tolerance are usually liked by others and easy to get along with. A meditation course offers many opportunities to practice tolerance. Is your neighbor meditator quite quiet or noisy? Do they move around a lot? Maybe they breathe heavily. Perhaps the food has some missing ingredient or was accidentally burnt that morning by the volunteer staff. If your reaction to these situations is accepting and non-judgmental, you will be increasing your parami of tolerance. Every day, we are faced with opportunities to strengthen this quality in ourselves as we go through our life, especially in today's world where people are encouraged to be assertive. Assertiveness and intolerance can easily get mixed up. If you have to wait in line, spend that time feeling the changing nature of the sensations within yourself instead of fretting or getting agitated. Traffic jams are an excellent place to practice awareness of change and to be tolerant. Intolerance comes mostly when we feel someone else is personally affronting us. Most likely, they are unaware of this affront. Anger and hatred are usually the result, which work against our efforts to walk on the path. And we simply build up more and more sankharas, mental reactions.
Yeah, I really like this section because you talk a bit about anger here, and that line, assertiveness and tolerance, can easily get mixed up. What do you mean by that?
Well, some people, they can be my way's the only way.
Yeah, because in this section, I like it because you talk about anger, and I guess I'm wondering, sometimes the entire process of purification actually brings sankharas up to the surface. So we might find that at certain times in our life, we're facing more anger or more sadness or more anxiety or whatever it might be. And so the meditator might think, gosh, I'm regressing. But in fact, it's part of the process to learn to face these new chunks of sankhara that are rising up. I'm wondering if, you can talk a little bit about that's just a simple act of not trying to learn not to beat ourselves up when we fall down and make a mistake, and sort of understand that it's part of the process and how to like pick ourselves up and start again.
Yeah, that's tricky because sometimes it takes you time to be aware that that's what it is. You're beating yourself up, like you said, and you're feeling that you failed or whatever, and so it's but it's the same thing. You just have to bring it back when you do become aware of it. Something hopefully will clue you in. Maybe your sensations usually will, if you're aware of them, will feel out of sort. They're going to be biting you, or they're going to be poking. They're going to be, you're not feeling very well. So what's going on? Hopefully you get to that point where you start saying, oh, what's going on? Yeah, I need to sit. I mean, Sahaji kept this chair at his desk in his office, and he would stop during the day and meditate. And he would, take 5 or 10 minutes and meditate. Because even he had stuff building up on him. He had a really tremendous amount of pressure, all the stuff that he was doing, Of course, his awareness was monumental. But even he had to stop and just stop and meditate a little bit. Be aware of anicca, calm down, focus the mind. And I think it's a good thing for people to do. And if you're in an office job or something like that, it's much easier to do because you could just be sitting there at the old computer and pretend you're working and just be doing it. So I did that.
You did? You used to do that at your job?
Yeah, I used to do it. I have be staring at the computer and I'd just be so.
That's great. Okay, then I just have a few more questions, but one of them, again, the paramis, there's this beautiful section on equanimity, and I wondered if you could read that, page 55.
Okay. Equanimity, upekkha. Some people have trouble understanding this word. Equanimity or equanimous means to be balanced and not to react. We need a balanced mind to progress on the path. If we are shaken by the slightest obstacle or agitated easily, we must find a way to bring our minds back to a place where we can observe equanimously. Some students find their problem is that they get thrown off track by trying too hard. They are gritting their teeth, thinking, I've got to get this, and thinking that by pushing harder, it will help them. It won't. It takes balance, not strength. Many students on courses have received much benefit from just taking a walk or for 5 minutes rather than trying to push through their pain or agitation. The story of monks breaking their knee bones and not moving until they are fully liberated are of people whose paramis are fulfilled and not of ones that are just starting on the path. In Burma, at Chaitio, the Golden Rock, there was a huge boulder that is balanced on just a very small spot. The entire weight of that boulder, plus the pagoda that is built on top of it, is balanced on a very small area. The boulder is unshakable. If your equanimity was focused like that weight of that rock, you would be unshakable too.
Yes, it's wonderful. And I just want to read this one line in there again. Many students on courses have received much benefit from just taking a walk for 5 minutes rather than just trying to push through their pain and agitation. It's such a profound line because I wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about that. Because it's so, we hear these stories of, really pushing hard and working hard. And we just think, I'm going to use virya, and we misunderstand virya and we push. Yeah. And then we realize, and sometimes years later, wow, I'm totally off balance here,
I sure have been caught in that, and I'm sure others have too. Yeah. So virya is effort, but it's not. It's proper effort. So what you have to do is have to realize Goenkaji says work harder, work harder. But what he means when he says work harder is to maintain the awareness of anicca for longer periods. That's what he's saying when he's saying work harder. It's not just grit your teeth and try, it's not that. It's trying. You have to have a balanced mind. It has to be focused, balance. It has to be, so you have this feeling of peace and calm inside when you're working, to really be able to work properly, to be able to feel anicca, right? So if you have a feeling of striving in a way that you might on a football field or in a race or something like that, it's not going to help you. That kind of effort isn't going to help. It's a different kind of effort. This is a subtle effort of maintaining, of being aware of the next arising and falling, and then being aware of the next arising and falling, and being aware of the next arising and falling. That is what we're talking about. What we're talking about right effort.
Did you kind of have this realization slowly over time, or did you have a friend on the path who kind of pushed you, or was it Goenkaji's instructions? What kind of helped you to kind of start to turn this corner? It's such a common corner to turn.
I think it was, as far as like realizing where people were going wrong, other people was, when I started conducting long courses, and so many people there, they're getting out of balance by just striving too hard. And, I also heard this great story about Mother Sayama, who was, Sayagyi's assistant in Burma. And when somebody came to her, they were having too much, they were just working too hard or something like that. She says, "Go have a piece of chocolate and relax." It's just it's so wonderful.
That's really sweet.
Take a walk.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever you read about meditation, it's always about proper balance and focus and being relaxed. And it's not about this crazy push. It's not going to work. I mean, you have to have that effort. You have to be able to sit long hours and do this and go do courses, but not break into stone with a rock. That's for sure.
Yeah. I have this memory of pushing hard, and then sort of walking out of my cell at night and just feeling more peace just walking out of the cell than I did in that cell, just taking a break. And it took me years to kind of realize what that wisdom was, and sort of try to incorporate that more into my practice on the cushion. So
I think what happens when you do that, you actually lose your concentration. I get that feeling that you lose when you're pushing that hard like that, you're losing your concentration. Yeah,
it's about something else, becomes a game. It's kind of a game, and it's really about like, hardcore sports or something. Yeah. For me, that's what it had become. And it took me some time to realize, no, this is not it. So on page, there's another section I'm hoping we can look at that's it's about daily sittings and moral actions on page 66.
Okay. Daily sittings and moral action should be the base of your effort. Without them, you will very quickly stop making effort because you won't see the benefits accumulate in life. Stay strong and follow those two basic elements of the path. Remember to avoid those people who can bring you down. They are not fun. Instead, trying to develop friends who are meditators and those who respect others and live a clean life. As the Buddha said, friends are the whole path. They will help to lift you up, and you will do the same for them. An internal combustion engine must have fuel, air compression, and a spark to set off the combustion that makes the engine turn and produce power. They all must be in the correct amounts and come together at the right time. When you practice properly, all the elements will come together in the correct amounts, and you will produce energy and move ahead on the path. Your days and your life will be filled with joy. When I first went to Burma and met some of Sayagyi Ubakin's students, I realized one thing. These people were normal. They were normal in a good way, a healthy, harmonious way. There were no rough edges, and humor and smiles were a common part of their lives. I don't know of anyone who had a better sense of humor than Goenkaji. He was so fast with a quip. Many of my Dhamma friends are the same way. The wonderful thing about this technique is that the benefits manifest themselves here and now. There is no need to wait for some afterlife to get the results of your efforts. Each step of the way brings you closer to the goal, and you can feel it as it manifests in your life. You have accomplished the most difficult part, and that is finding the path and taking the first step. Now you just need to apply yourself. There is so much support available for you. May you grow in the Dhamma, may you glow in the Dhamma, and may you be truly happy.
Yeah, it's really sweet. That's the end of the book, of course, and it's such a beautiful ending. But I'm wondering if you can tell a little story, and I haven't asked you about this before, but I heard from a friend of yours, I think, who lives in England now, named John Luxford, that when he first arrived to Dhammagiri, he had this idea of what a meditator should be, and he arrived dressed in all white, and he was very, very careful and soft-spoken, and he ran into you first thing, and I wonder if you can tell the story.
Yeah. And that was up in Dalhousie in 1975. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and So John had been the contact from New Zealand for the newsletter, and this big, tall guy, and he comes up, "Hey, Bill, I understand that Bill said I don't know. I guess I just have a lot of enthusiasm, and he just felt that I was always kind of boisterous, I guess, or whatever.
He said that you kind of, patted him on the back and said, "Hi, John, how are you doing?" And it broke for him this idea of what a meditator should be like. You were just normal, he said, and friendly. And it helped him to just realize he could be himself more, So
yeah,
sweet.
He's a great guy.
So at the end of that section, there's this beautiful line that says, "There's so much support available for you." What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Well, how about Pariyatti for one? I just wish more people would learn about it and take advantage of it. I mean, I think Pariyatti is one fantastic thing for students. Another is that I don't think they know, but there's so much information at the end of the course on day 10, but that they can contact an AT or contact the center or make, ask questions, that there are group sittings in many areas. There are a lot of materials like videos and discourses that are available. There are so many things that we have tried to give to students so that they can, now we've got this new app with the, Dhamma.org that allows them to get discourses, not discourses, I mean the group sittings right on their phones. And some of those discourses have instructions all the way through them, are quite good for people who may not have been only done one or two courses and don't really know what they should be doing. And Goenkaji is explaining everything to them, to how to practice during those group sittings. So everybody's always trying to do things to help the students, and it's just a matter of them getting the information to know what all these things are.
Great. So that my last question is a section on this path is a path of experience. It's on page 64. Thought we could end with this.
Okay. This is the path of experience. One may read and study for eons and yet never move even 1 inch on the path of Dhamma. Webu, who gave Sayadaw Kin and all who met him tremendous inspiration, was considered by many to be an arhat. He realized very early in his monkhood that in order to attain the final goal, he must leave the teaching monastery where they only taught learning the suttas and go to the jungle to practice Vipassana. He realized that studying the text would not help him attain full liberation. His goal was full liberation, not intellectual understanding. His decision proved correct for him, and it will for you. Webu Sayadaw realized that solely book learning was a dead end for someone with the paramis to be a meditator, and so must you.
That's beautiful.
Pariyatti there.
Yes,
Pariyatti gives inspiration and can fill in a lot of blanks about what you need to know in your practice for sure. But you gotta do the work. There's no other way.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's a lovely way to end. And thank you so much for being with us today and sharing some of your stories. And thank you for writing this book. I think it's helping a lot of us to establish our meditation practice.
Well, thank you for having me. And I love talking with you, Marta. So
yeah.
Again.
Okay, great. So looks like you've changed your location.
Yeah, I'm getting a good signal there. I had to shift.
So maybe Tina, would you like to do just a quick sound check before we do questions? Or is it okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So I have a few questions from the audience I'm hoping that you can answer. So the first one is, what is the one practice or thing that you do in your daily life outside of your meditation room that most enabled and solidified your meditation practice?
All right. So the idea is to become constantly aware. I mean, this is what has to happen at some point in your practice. It's a very difficult thing to do because there's so much input all the time coming in. But there are ways that you can remind yourself. A lot of times, most of the time, as soon as you quiet down, you get to a certain point where, you're aware of anicca, you start feeling it. But other times you'll realize that you're doing something like maybe you start whistling, and that's like a signal. Oh, I am not being aware. Or you start twiddling your thumbs, or you start singing a song or something. You just do something that is total unawareness. So at that time, it's like a signal. Wake up. Get back to being aware of your sensations or becoming aware of your breath. That's one thing you can do.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wondered if you could just talk briefly about the cover of the book, the little drawings and the knots at the beginning of each chapter. They're really beautiful. Could you just talk about how that process and how those were created?
Okay, so what happened was, my father had brought home a knot. Sailors back in the old days, this was in the 1920s, prior, and especially in the days of sail, they did a lot of knot tying and lots of work with rope. They had to because ships were dependent on it. Not so much in the 1920s, it was a steamship. But that was the knot that he had brought back with him. I keep it by my desk all the time. And I thought, well, that would be a neat knot to untie. So the gentleman up in Vancouver did these knots for us. That's it, Dan Raskett, right?
Yeah.
Right. And he did a fantastic job of untying the knots.
So they all untie by the end of the book.
Yeah. So we're tying up knots. When they're all untied, then you're enlightened, right?
That's great. Yeah. Okay. So you were talking about being in Myanmar and, being with Mother Sayama, Sayaji's assistant. So did you ever you mentioned Webu Sayadaw at some point. Did you ever meet him, Webu Sayadaw?
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate to be there one time when he came and came to Burma. He didn't come to the center, but we were just finishing up a monk's course, and we all had shaven heads, and we went to this huge place, like the size of a basketball court, or bigger even, big arena, where packed with people, dressed to the nines. And we were also, all of the ladies at the center, they got up their best lungis. If they didn't have a fantastic one, the other ladies gave them one, and wonderful tops and jewelry, and all us guys put on our best lungis, and we went down there, and piled in a bunch of cars. And so we got there, and he's sitting on is at the front of this auditorium, and places packed with people, just wonderful vibration in there. And they would bring him a tray with this fantastic array of food on it, and he would take a piece of rice from this one, dip his finger in that one, get a little of the sauce, and then they take that one away, another, because everybody brought food. Feeding in our hut is like super a big thing for devoted Buddhists in Burma. So after that was over, we went into the side room, and we just the Sayadaw students and him and his interpreter, and Mother Sayama, Jitin, it might have been, I think, maybe Wapu and Nitini. And we sat there right next to him, and he sat perfectly still with his hands down in front of him. He had the most beautiful skin, very muscled man, considering that, he was meditating all the time. But he never lost his focus. It was just absolutely perfectly in control. And we had a chat with him, and he asked us questions about our practice and about why we'd come there. And he said something about the fact that, here you come from all these foreign countries, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, United States, Canada, and we don't even, people that live across the street won't even walk across the street from their houses to do a course at the center. And, it was very, very wonderful experience.
Wow, wonderful. There's a few questions from the audience here. Have you ever considered becoming a monk yourself? Did you ever think about
Yeah, I thought about
it?
I was driving down Shattuck Avenue. I crossed Telegraph, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is crazy. Why am I living this life? And I should become a monk. Yes, okay, I'm going to become a monk. So I was driving down. It's like a mile from there down to where I lived across from Live Oak Park. And so as I'm driving down there, I think, well, geez, then I'd have to sell this and have to get rid of that. And, what would I do about that? And sell the car. And as I'm driving along and thinking about all this stuff, by the time I got home, I changed my mind. But it was not very good parvis for being a monk. Although I was very fortunate to ordain twice at IMC. The year that Weibu was there, and another year also. That was for a week, and it was a very, very powerful experience. We all were ordained. We followed all 227 precepts, and the other students there that hadn't ordained, and the female students, they would, we'd go around and do bindabat around the top of the pagoda outside there, and it was really, really wonderful.
That's wonderful. So there's a question here about being a young father. And since you didn't become a monk, but you were a very good father, I think. So the question is for one of the audience members. My question is regarding balance between family responsibilities and the practice. Being the father of 3 boys under 4 years old, I find it quite challenging to keep sitting morning and evening. Goenkaji mentioned something about caring for another person and making it your meditation at this moment. What would be your advice for young parents in maintaining their daily practice?
That's it. You have to maintain, your care of your children. That is the important thing, especially when they're young like that. And I remember Anne, when Ian was born, he had this incredible thing that as soon as she sat to sit, he would wake up. So the only way she could sit was to have him in her lap. And, for, I don't know, months, that was the way she had to do it. She couldn't do it any other way. So you have to put the children first and squeeze in whatever you can do, and that's the most important thing. Don't crooks. They get to be about 4, 5, 6 years old. Now they're all doing all their stuff. They're, not thinking about you very much. And even more so when they're teenagers. So it all works out.
Okay, great. Here's another question. You mentioned watching sensations appear and disappear. I am still mostly stuck at Anapana. Sometimes I can see the sensations, but I'm often reacting to them. I try to maintain equanimity, but it's hard. How do you reach watching impermanence?
Okay, I think when I said that, I qualified it by you have to be able to feel sensations subtly throughout your body. Mm-hmm. So if you're mostly doing Anapana, do your Anapana really correctly. On one of those discourses, one of those group sittings, he very, very clearly defines how to do Anapana. Start watching the in-breath as it comes in. Watch the middle of the breath, the end of the breath, as it turns around, as it starts going out, the beginning of the out-breath, the middle of the out-breath, the end of the out-breath. It stops and turns around. And just keep doing Anapana and doing it in that manner. Try to find that. You go into the Dhamma.org app, and you'll find one of those group sittings. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'm sorry. So don't do your whole sitting with Anapana, though. Try to get as concentrated as you can, and then switch to Vipassana. It's one of the reasons you're not able to do Anapana properly might be that you're not cleaned out enough. In other words, you haven't worked enough with feeling sensations to be able to do Anapana, or to get more and more concentrated. People think it's because they're not working properly. Their mind's going off like that. It's just is that stuff is coming. Sankharas are manifesting quickly. They're just coming quickly, and they're pulling you away. And so you pull yourself back. You realize what's happening, you come back. It's just, you're not doing anything wrong. Just keep, be aware of the sensations, whatever they are. It doesn't matter about their rising and falling at this point. Just keep with feelings until you get sensations throughout your body. it will automatically come. It has to come. It's just a matter of the sankharas that are arising in you are blinding you to being able to feel them. It can go on for a while. I mean, it can go on for a couple of years or more. And so don't be depressed or feel that you're not doing it right. It just is, that is what is manifesting in you at this time. Stick with that and it'll come, it'll pass. It did for me. I had to go for quite a few years before I could feel sensations in my back and chest. I mean, regularly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question from an audience member. How can you demonstrate tolerance in the face of colleagues who do not have a proper frame of mind without becoming a pushover? Sometimes it is important to keep a stance. Any insights?
Yeah, that's true. Goenkaji says, don't let yourself be cut by like a vegetable. So there are always going to be people like that. And, you know, every office and even if you're not working in an office, you're working on a job site or whatever type of work you do, you have to try to just send them as best you can. Sometimes it's hard to pull it up. So then just try for equanimity. Then when you lose it, try to keep it short. Try to not be so personal that it damages your relationship with them. You know, they're just people, they're just deluded and they have a very unfortunate manner. And you're going to have to figure out a way of working with them. Use your metta as best you can. It really, really works.
Can you tell a story or tell us a little more about, people often talk about how metta really, really works. Is there any story you could tell about that? Or
yeah, I I use it all the time. I mean, I'll use it with a strappy person in a market or something, or I use it with customers when I was did sales. But so you can do it in your life. But like on a course, you'll see a student who'll be having a really hard time by their physical motions and the way they're presenting, and maybe they can't keep their eyes closed or whatever. You can, a teacher can sit there and practice metta, and you'll see that person all of a sudden start calming down. It happens regularly. So the more you practice it, the more it comes into your life, you'll just see. With the fellow that has children, that's really important with them. Believe me, it works.
And when you're in a grocery store, like if you were, like you mentioned, practicing it towards a clerk or something, just tell us, how do you do that? You think just describe the process.
Yeah, so usually I can pull up metta very easily. I mean, sometimes I just have a reaction to something, especially something sad or, you know, a story of somebody dying or something like that. But it fills me instantly. But in a situation like that, obviously it's not like in that situation. But you just, this poor suffering being, may she be happy or may he be happy. You know, you feel the sensations in your body, and they'll start reacting by having a certain feeling of metta. And a lot of times you'll end up having a good interaction with them.
Okay, great. That's helpful. There's another question here. Due to my work schedule, I can only fit my morning sitting into my day when I sleep 1 hour less. My body is sensitive to reduced sleep, and I feel drowsy throughout the day and during the evening sit when I do this. If I continue to sit 2 hours daily regardless, will I eventually overcome these symptoms of sleep deprivation? Thank you.
Go to bed earlier. You can't control when you got to get up, but you can control when you go to bed. I think you will. You know, when you're meditating, it's a very relaxing part of your day, and it fills in the sleep time very well, because when you're sleeping, the body is readjusting itself and the mind that's what's going on. There's all this background stuff that's happened in the day that's being processed. And so when you're meditating, you're processing all that stuff that happened during the day also, or that was dug up in your sleep at night. So if you keep doing it, it will definitely improve your daily situation. Also, one of the best things, and I do it all the time, is cat naps. I mean, I used to do it at work. I'd go into the we had a meeting room, and I'd take a thick book. I was, remember on the days how to, like this for something for dummies or something like that. One of them was about that thick. I took it in there. I'd use that for a pillow, and I'd just sweep and and then I'd usually fall asleep for about 5 minutes and go back to work, and I'd be totally refreshed.
Okay, great. That's helpful. There's another question here about group sittings. The place where I'm group sittings used to go, the place where I used to go for group sittings don't happen anymore. I want to start a group, like an official group sitting at my own place. You have any suggestions on how to start?
Yeah. So write to info at your local center, or if you know an AT there, and or center manager, anybody at the center, or call them and tell them what you want to do, and they'll send you an application, and certain rule guidelines because have other people come into your house that we want the students that are holding group sittings to follow. And if you do that, then you become listed on the official group sitting list, and have people come over. It's really great. We did it for 30 years straight. Yeah.
What did you say? You did it for 30 years?
Probably about 30 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Used to have, yeah.
What was that like to have group sittings at your place for 30 years like that?
Nice. So, was it not nice sometimes? No, it was just really nice. Like a weekly gathering of friends. They become your friends, obviously. A small town like I live in. You see walking down the street, you see meditators all the time, and yeah, it's a pretty nice experience.
So
I encourage everybody to try to do it if they can.
Yeah.
Either go or have it.
Yeah, I wonder if it contributed to the meditator population in your town having such a stable group sitting for so long.
Oh, it definitely helps people keep their practice together. There's no doubt. I mean, if you have a group sitting like that every week, I mean, you're going to get a good hit. First of all, the room you're sitting in has been sitting in for, imagine, 30 years, right? So it really helps, even if it's just for a few months. You're sitting there with other people. It's a stronger sitting. It really is, and it helps you to meditate deeply.
Okay, great. That's the end of the questions I see from the audience, but I had one more. I'm wondering if we could go back a little bit to Myanmar, because I'd never heard you tell that story before. It's really interesting. Do you have any, I wondered if you could explain what is an arahant and what did it feel like to be in front of one in Webu Sayadaw?
Well, an arahant is a person who has killed all of his enemies. In our case, enemies are hate, greed, and delusion. And at each step, excuse me, of the four stages, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, and Arhan, certain fetters fall away. First, things like rites and rituals, believe in a permanent self, and the third one is, and that falls away. So when those hindrances fall away, you can imagine what that does to your meditation and to your belief. That's it. Faith in the third one is faith. That's practice. will lead you to Nibbana. And so when you get to the next step, then more fetters fall away. And then the next step, Anagami, more fetters fall away. So these things that drug you down to the lower levels of rebirth, they disappear. You can't go down because your awareness is such, and the sankharas that you have eliminated, your behaviors that you previously did automatically before, you're no longer including in your life. They're not there. And so your behavior becomes perfect, as you know, in the Jipso, Bhagava, Arahant, Sama, Sambuddha, Vijja, Charana, Sampano, perfect in knowledge and behavior. So what happens is that behavior becomes perfect. Your knowledge becomes more perfect until you get to the final stage where all of your fetters to being reborn are removed. It's beautiful. It's a very tough thing to do, obviously. But you can move so far along in one life. It's incredible.
So then can you talk about what it felt like sitting in front of Webu Sayadaw, given all of that?
Yeah, I mean, well, there was an aura of peace and tranquility in that room and being with him. And the inspiration of it was just wonderful. He had a sense of humor too that was very interesting. It just all revolved around people and their seriousness of practice. That's the way I think of it. And I knew a woman, a German woman who spent a lot of time up there in Jinbin with that nun that I was at a center. They were good friends. And she told me that the last thing, his last words were, "I leave you with Charana and Vijja," which is quite interesting because it's the opposite of the way it is in the salute to the Buddha. So you just can't be around somebody like that without feeling that wonderful vibration. And, you know, that's what you feel at centers, because not that strong, obviously, but because people are living a wholesome life there, because they're meditating, it just starts getting stronger and stronger. And when you go to places like Bodh Gaya, where Buddha attained enlightenment, or in Shravasti or someplace like that, or Nanda's cave, where there's this tremendous vibration, it's just, it's wonderful. Your concentration becomes extremely strong too when you're in that vibration.
Wonderful. I think that's a great place to end. And thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, well,
today.
I wish everyone happiness and good will, and I hope that you all work hard on the path, because it's a wonderful thing. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill and Marta. On behalf of Pariyatti, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this event. And just to let you know, as a small resource limited nonprofit organization, we rely on volunteers wherever possible to help us out. And today's event would not have been possible without the generous support of both Tina Savla and Chandra Gupta. So thanks again for your help. As always, it's much appreciated. So thanks again, everyone. Bye.
See you, Briha's Martin.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Bill.